Welcome to Stand Up Memories. Great
Say
guest.
the same thing every time.
No?
You say, before you say anything,
Well-
I got to tell you, Eddie, this is our 5th season. We've done a lot of Zooms, and by a factor of 2, you have the best camera I've ever seen. You look like, I feel like I'm looking at Cinerama, right?
Yeah.
Most people are like, it's blurry, and they're looking at you like,
Boy.
you're beautiful.
Well, my brother Keith works on film and television, so he set it up for me. I have like a scrim and a light thing, and there's a light behind me, but I put the blurry background so you didn't,
It's just perfect. All right, good.
All right. Can
Start
we
the
introduce?
show.
We haven't even.
But I want to find out from you exactly what you did, because you look incredible.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the
all right.
setup looks incredible.
Right, I understand.
Take it away, Pedro.
Welcome again to Stand Up Memories. No, I messed it up.
See, that's so much
Yeah.
better, though.
Welcome
it's
again.
a little different when you screw
More
up.
fun when you screw up.
Yeah.
Welcome
Yeah.
again to Stand Up Memories. I am Peter Bales.
What show is this? Is
this
this
is
Stand-Up Memories?
Stand Up Memories. I'm Peter Bales. This is Jackie the Joke Man Martling, and we have a consummate comedian with us today, Eddie BRILL.
What kind of compliment is that? A compliment? Consummate?
Consummate, the ultimate.
Consummate is soup, isn't it? No, it's
Yeah, it sounds like you
consommé.
eat a lot of
That's
soup.
consommé.
It's like a Jewish thing.
Consommé, yeah.
Longtime talent coordinator for Late Night with David Letterman and
Late show.
the Late
Late
Show with David Letterman. What I
Right.
said. Let's get that
Late
right.
night. Late night was the NBC show.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
The Late Show with David Letterman and warm-up comedian, a very, very difficult job to do, and has worked everywhere
As long as us.
as long as us. And one of the things I'm jealous about is
Everything.
everything is
Mhm.
all of your success in the business. No, you've performed a lot in Europe, and I've never performed in Europe. I wanted to ask, does it feel different? Do they laugh at different things? Is the rhythm the same?
Actually, they get so much American television,
Okay.
so they like, I started there like in 1989, and I met all these people when they were young comics, and I said, "Hey, which way to the loo?" And they're like, "Fuck you, like, don't talk down to us. We know it's bathroom. We've seen television." They don't. And the great thing about working in Europe is there's no bullshit, and they don't put up with pandering. And that's one of the things I learned from working in Europe, is how much we as Americans pander. Hey, give yourselves a round of applause for coming out tonight. It's I've never. And the first line on my audition at the Comedy Store in London, I said, "It's great to be here in London," and the guy yells out, "Bullshit!" And if I didn't come back, it was over. I said, "You're right. It's a shithole. Smells like piss," and the crowd cheered because I had 10 minutes to, and all the comics and the guy who ran the place, they were like, make us laugh, American. And luckily, the main thing is there's no pandering over there. They don't put up with that. Let's hear it for the troops. It's like, who's gonna go, "Hey, ladies and gentlemen, fuck the troops." No one.
If there's one expression that I hate more than anything in the world is, "Hey, make some noise."
Right.
Oh, I just want to strangle anybody with it's a rock concert or somebody introducing a show.
Come on, give yourselves a hand.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's and the whole thing is when someone brings you up and the crowd cheers and they go, "That's not loud enough. Let's hear it again." It's like, no, don't do that to the crowd.
So I got to ask, how did you make that happen? I've been trying to get overseas. I mean, I know I have a dirty joke act, but I know it would fit somewhere. I've been I had to fight to get to Iraq where they're going to shoot at me,
Right. Well, it's double fighting. That's the way you go where the fighting is. For me, Dennis Leary was my roommate in college, and we started our comedy together in a comedy group, and his son was born prematurely. So I went over there to go hang out and see Dennis, and he had some stand-up gigs and stuff. And so I went over to the Comedy Store on my own, and I said, "Look, I'm in town only for a few days." And the guy says, "Okay, we'll have a spot, an open spot, they call it." And luckily I got past the first heckle bullshit. And it was interesting because I went up to the MC or the concierge and I said, I've been on HBO, I've been on this. And the guy looked at me like, fuck you. And I was like, what? And when he brought me up, he didn't say anything. I followed a music act and the guy crushed. And in their crushing, ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Brill, not even from America, nothing. So luckily I did well. And they asked me to come back for the week. So during the week, I was hanging out with this MC guy, and I go, and he was starting to be nice. And I said, look, while we're sucking each other's dicks here, what was that first night that I gave you, you didn't, give me a good intro? He goes, intro? He says, I thought you were bragging to me about your career. Because see, they don't do the intros. They don't go, you might have seen this next person on whatever. They don't do that because the guy said to me, why would you fuck yourself up with an intro? Why would you say how many comedians do you know that have intros that are shitty? Like you've been on a TV show with the guy when they suck. And he said, just go up and do your act. And that's how we do it in England.
That's great. I was on the road down south for a month with two guys. I'm not saying the names, but one guy had a walk-on on a Sly Stallone movie. And another guy had one line in some movie, and they were both brought up. I was headlining, and this is so-and-so who was in the Sly Stallone movie, and this is so-and-so was in such and such a movie. And then here's your headliner, Jackie Martling. He has a comedy album out. And I think I went on stage and said, but the difference is I really do. Like, Jesus Christ. Because the introductions are so off the.
I always remember Catch a Rising Star. The bigger the act, the shorter the introduction. And David Brenner said to the MC, don't even go up. I'll just walk up myself. No introduction needed. And the audience would go crazy. We've all,
you know what Brenner told me that I loved? He said, I would always say my name in the act. Like I'd say, visiting my mom would go, David. And, and so people would remember who he was. And I started doing that a little bit. Then I felt weird doing it, but I remember him saying that. He was very good to me. He was a good guy.
He was a terrific comedian and a good guy.
That's like the old trick. If you're at a party, you tell your girlfriend or your friend, if we're talking to somebody and you can tell I'm drawing a blank, work their name into the conversation. You're like, oh, isn't it great to see Peter again, Jackie? No, yeah.
Yeah. Recently I was in Florida and I was with a friend of mine who I've known since childhood because I lived in Florida for a little bit of my childhood. And we're walking down the street and I see another couple that I know from a different thing. And as we're walking by, I forgot the name of my friend who is my friend for a million years. I couldn't remember her name. So I'm having a conversation with this side of my brain going, hey, what are you doing? How you been? And on this side, I'm going, Betty, Susie, Mary. And I'm trying to get it. And I'm panicking. Finally, I got it. And I said, Linda, this is Linda. It's just I'm getting old, I guess. Or
but that is you're probably 3 steps away from them. And those 3 steps probably felt like a week, right?
Oh, God. I wanted to bury myself under the sidewalk.
Hey, I swim every morning. And this morning I swam for like an hour. And I spent an hour trying to think of the name of the actor that played the Lone Ranger. And I never got it. I picked up my phone when I got home and I said, who played the Lone Ranger on television? Barbara, my girlfriend's like, what are you doing? I said, it's a long story. Because sometimes you go to think of something and it's just not there. And more now,
Yes.
Hey, Eddie, a lot of comedians have memories of horrible introductions they've gotten. And I want to share the worst introduction I ever got as a comedian, and maybe it'll set you off and set you off. A college. I'm introduced by the president of the student government, packed house of college students. I was a young comic ready to roll. And here's my introduction. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I said, shut the fuck up. All right, you're on.
Hilarious.
I will never forget that.
Oh, not long ago, I did corporate thing. And on the show was Trisha Yearwood, who I really think is great, and Jay Leno. So I was going first, and Jay said, I'd like to bring her up instead of you bringing her up. I said, sure. He says, she's been on my show a million times. So I did my thing. I brought Jay on, and he does his thing. And then, and he's still hilarious. That's one thing, that he's a great comic. And I was dying laughing. And I'm sitting there, and he goes, okay, next. Now he forgot Trisha Yearwood's name. So he's giving her the longest intro in the world, and he still can't get it. And
He was
goes,
buying
"Come on."
time. He was giving her a
Yeah,
long
he's trying to buy time because he can't remember her name. And he just said, come on up on stage. And she was like, okay. And she walked on. And afterwards I went, you forgot her name, didn't you? And he goes, yeah.
Oh, that's
Oh, that was it. Could everybody tell really, or were you the only one who could tell?
I think me and him are the only people who knew.
Oh,
you know, a million years ago, I was at a wedding, and the two guys I worked for, it was a friend of the Alessi brothers. It was a rock and roll band. It was their good friend. And one of the partners said, geez, I can't remember the bride's name. And I said, it's Shirley. And I lied. And me and my friend Kevin stood there and watched the receiving line, and you couldn't hear. You saw him get to the groom and then shake the girl's hand. And just the pantomime. He died, but I'm sure wherever he is, he's still pissed off.
Oh my God, it's
It was
fantastic.
such a harmless, horrible prank. And it's so funny because you tell that to some people and they roar, and other people are like, that's not funny. Why would you do something like that? Because it's funny,
It's funny. Schimmel told me the story where he was working with some kid and he was nervous and he had never emceed before. And he was going on the stage and the guy said, Robert, what should I do? And he says, start off by telling the audience that Raymond Burr died. Right? So he goes, really? He goes, you'll get them on your side and then whatever. So the kid goes on stage and goes, ladies and gentlemen, just before we start, I regret to inform you that Raymond Burr died. And the crowd was like, oh, and people like crying and sad. And then he could never get his act back. And the owner of the club went up to him and said, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And he says, I'm sorry. And so he goes to Schimmel for the second show and said, no, don't listen to that guy. He's the owner. He doesn't know anything about comedy. You go back up and you tell them that Raymond Burr died. And the guy went back on stage, said Raymond Burr died, and the crowd cried. They hated it. And meanwhile, Schimmel was pounding on the wall behind the stage. It's hilarious.
So long ago, when the hostages was probably 1980, and every night in the news, whether it was Walter Cronkite or whoever it was behind them, the hostages are, trapped day 321. The hostages are 330. And finally, the hostages got released. And Mike Reynolds, who we lost a while ago, goes, Jackie, tell me if this is funny. I'm thinking of opening with, the hostages are free day one. Of course, it was such a horrible, it wasn't
fantastic.
Funny. And I said, that's great, Mike. They'll just like, they'll be on your side. And he never got out of that hole. I mean,
oh my God.
They were appalled. Like, that's the kind of stunt that's so fun.
That's the whole key, is to really have fun. And, that I learned from working with people like Schimmel and stuff like that. We try to do things like one time I brought up Dana Gould and I said, it's not often you work with funny people, and tonight's no different. This next guy's a prick and he's unfunny. And it was weird because Dana was like a little shocked. And afterwards he said, why'd you say that? I go, we're in San Francisco. They love you here. They know I'm joking. But it was just really funny to, the audience was like, what? And then they laughed.
One time at Dangerfield's in Manhattan, I said to a new comic right before he was going to go on, it was the day after Whitney Houston died. Oh. And I said to him, try this joke. It's so funny. They're going to love it. Just walk up and say, Whitney Houston, clean and sober, day 2.
Right.
And he walks up and he does that. And the whole audience was appalled. I mean, just, and he never dug out.
But you never forget.
Can't get out of it.
There was a guy, the only comic I remember that wore a bow tie besides like Uncle
Stu
Floyd's dog.
Tribex.
He, huh?
Stu?
Yes, I remember the great,
Tribex.
he was Stu Trivax. Did you?
Oh, not
he
Stu,
was
he's the other
so
guy.
funny.
This guy was from Philadelphia, and he was at Chuckles, and he was hosting.
Grover Silcox.
Grover Silcox, and he had to
I didn't know
introduce
him.
me. And he said, Jackie, what do you want me to say? And I said, tell him I've got the biggest cock on the East Coast. And without missing a beat, he walked on stage and said, ladies and gentlemen, now we have Jackie Martling, who has the biggest cock anybody ever told me they had. I mean, in 5 seconds, it took him to, I said, that was brilliant.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Hey, Eddie, you know, we have a lot of success on this podcast talking to comedians about the toughest thing or the most difficult time they ever had on stage, because 99.9% of the shows are great.
Yeah.
But when you get together with comedians, you tend to focus on the fights, the
You know,
power
you always do this
going on.
long introduction. Why don't you just say, tell us a horror show?
Those are
The-
so funny.
There was a place in Plymouth, Massachusetts called the Charlie Horse, aptly named. There was a girl that I was crazy about, and I kept asking. She lived in Boston, and I said, "Will you come with me on a gig? Or will you let me go out with you?" And she was very demure and very lovely, and she finally said yes. So, and she had a car, and so she drives me to the thing. And we get there, and it's a biker bar, and you go in there, and it's like there's guys hitting and punching and hitting each other over the head with pool sticks, cues, and it was like the scene at the end of what do you call it? The not the producers, the Blazing Saddles, where
Yeah.
they're all smashing, and we were like, oh my God! And there was only men, and I said, where's the comedy go on? And he goes, in that room, and the guy pointed to another room. So me and the girl walk into the little room there, and it's all the girlfriends of the guys. But this is sad, unfortunately. They're like beaten up. These are the bruised and battered
Oh,
wow.
women. There was a woman with a sling. There was one woman with a baby stroller with a baby in it, and she's baby has a bottle and she has a Heineken. And it was just very sad. Now, this girl had never seen a comedy show or me. So she's sitting freaking out. So I go up on stage, and they just want the show to go on and on, because when it's over, it's not going to be a good night for them. So I'm talking, but they're not responding, not at all. So finally, I pointed to the lady with the beer, and I go, "Well, you know, no one's paying attention, but at least you are." She goes, "Fuck you!" and she throws the bottle at me. It smashes against the brick wall, and there are shards of glass in my shirt and my hair. And there was the longest 35-minute ride home of my life. And I
wow.
never saw that woman again.
Well, that was the follow-up question. And now I'm engaged to this woman.
Yeah,
Actually, that's a
right.
great comedy show, nightmare story. And it's the worst first date story you could possibly have.
The combination. Bill Downs, who used to run the Comedy Connection in
Yep, I
Boston,
know.
sent me on that gig. And about 2 years ago, I said, "Hey, remember the Charlie Horse?" He goes, "That's where we would send comedians who were new as sort of a testing ground. If you could get through that, you can do any gig."
So it put
Wow.
put hard bark on you.
Oh my God. And all
Oh,
the
that's
glass was a
funny.
smashed glass. And
Hey, Eddie, ever since we decided to book this, I was telling Bales that you and I worked together in Atlantic City, but for the life
yes,
of me, I cannot remember. Do you remember where it was?
at the Trump Hotel. And it was, I remember we had risers that we had to stand on, and it was kind of sad, actually. The audience was, they were forcing people in. It was kind of a new idea that they had.
Was it a
And
weekend
people,
or a one-nighter? Do you remember? I think it was a couple nights, right?
I think, it was a couple of nights, because I went out the next day. I went out on the beach. I remember that, and it was, the gig was the gig, and it didn't suck, and people came to see you, so there was a crowd, but it was a huge room with really high ceilings, which is a
Yeah.
death knell.
Right. I kind of
And
remember the room. I just didn't remember where it was,
oh yeah, no, that was it was fun hanging out, and the shows were okay, but for me, it was just being on the
So
beach in New York
where's
City.
your favorite place in the world to play?
There was a gig in Paris. I know it sounds,
Oh,
oh, there's
you
a gig in
snobby
Paris.
bastard.
I
Really?
know. there
I'm
was a
gonna
gig in
be, I'm gonna be
Paris.
in Hicksville next week. There's
Yeah.
a gig in Hicksville.
Let him finish.
Well, there's a place called Brill's in Hicksville, and that's also where I would go. I would go hit the baseballs, the batting cages in
Ah,
Hicksville. But and I love Hicksville actually. That was one of the better gigs in the world. But anyway, so Rich Hall says, Eddie,
oh,
there's a gig in Paris and you got to do it. And I said, okay. So there was a little tour that I did. I did London and then Amsterdam and then and Paris. And Paris was this room that they sold out all the time. It was only the expats who were living there, and they were dying for English entertainment. So once a month, this guy would put on a show, and it was literally and when I got there, I met the guy, and he says, "All right, you do 45 minutes, and we take a break, then you do another 45 minutes." And I'm like, "It's two different shows?" He goes, "No, same crowd." And I'm thinking, who else is on the show? He said, "It's you. It's your show, an hour and a half." I had quit smoking 7 months by this time, and I started smoking again. I swear, I just started smoking. My girlfriend said, "Hey, let's go to the Louvre." I go, "You go to the Louvre. I got to write an act out." So I took a yellow pad and I started writing stories from my life. I didn't know how I'm going to do an hour and a half to foreigners and this other thing. So I go up on, so I call Rich. I go, "What did you get me into? I don't have an hour and a half for these people." He goes, "It's like the greatest club in the world. It's like a jazz club for comedy. Go out there and ad lib for the first 45 and then take a break, come back and, and do your act." And so I says, "Okay." So I'm freaking out. I'm all nervous. I'm smoking like a chimney now. And the guy brings me up on stage, and it was the greatest gig I've ever done. It was like boom, ad lib, everything working. And I went to look at my watch. I figured I'd done about 25 or 30. I'd done an hour and 5 minutes. And I said, "Oh, we'll take a break and I'll be right back." And I came back, I did another hour, and then they wanted an encore. It was the best gig on the planet.
Oh,
And
that sounds
it was
fantastic.
and unfortunately they sold the building that this thing was in, and I did the gig like 3 times over the years, but so it was the best gig in the world.
Now, with these gigs like London and Amsterdam and Paris, were they connected at all?
Nah, you just had to know that, it was lucky because luckily I did well, and so the other comics were getting me other gigs, and you got to do this gig and you got to do this thing, and I was able, and I did television in Europe, and they had 4 channels. So if you go there, you're on television. The next day, everyone on the street knows you. It was long
Wow.
time ago.
Now, in Amsterdam, that wouldn't have been the club that Kelly Rogers was running.
No, 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 no. But it was a famous hotel where John Lennon and Yoko had their bed in, the Hilton.
right.
Oh,
Right.
oh, oh.
And it was just a Dutch club. But in the summer, they brought in Americans and Irish and British and, Australian comics, and they do an English speaking series. So the first night I did it, English is their second language. So I talk really fast. I'm on stage, blah, blah, and I didn't do well. And I was sitting in the back of the room, and I just, had a thing of vodka like this, and I'm drinking it. And the owner comes up and he goes, "Look, you talk too fast. These people need to learn. They have to hear what you're saying, then they have to figure it out." And so he said, "Use your hands, use your body more than just your words." So they can they can get the translation. And the second night it was a decent show, but it was a really cool gig.
Wow. The same thing I'm embarrassed to say, the first night I worked at Zany's in Nashville. And at the time, I was pretty consistently killing everywhere. And I went up and did all right, but just didn't do that well. And I don't know what dawned on me. And the next night I went up there and talked probably I think I got through half or 2/3 of my act, but I killed. And it's not that they're stupid. They just operate at a different speed, or at least the people in that crowd. And they had time to absorb and laugh. If you're doing your act and you're following the jokes too quick, you got to give people time to laugh. And same thing with absorbing, the setups and the premises.
Yeah, especially when it's a different language too, or a different culture. It's pretty crazy. So I learned to be more nonverbal. That's when I first learned about sort of and then you look at Jack Benny and you realize he got his biggest laughs on pauses.
Yes.
And then, little by little, I started becoming a better performer because of the failures. I mean, it sucked to be in Amsterdam, so excited, and then all of a sudden I walked off stage and I just needed to get hammered because it just felt so, and I thought the owner was going to fire me or whatever. And instead he got me drunk and he talked about it. And then the next night it was okay.
So-
That's great.
Eddie, you do something similar to what I do, and let's talk about this. I teach comedy classes at the brokerage here on Long Island, and you teach from what I understand, long single day workshops for comedians who want to punch it up. Am I correct?
It's a combination. It's a combination. I don't believe you can teach someone to be funny, but you can workshop comedy. So what I learn a lot from feedback. When people give me feedback, I take it in and I learn from it. So what I allow is everyone to be a teacher in that group. And they're all, even if you've never done comedy before, you're an audience member. And so we give each other feedback. So now I know, like, a lot of my friends through the years have given me their perception of me. Like, you go on stage and you're always touching your chin, which I did early on in my career, and all this stuff. And you learn from that. So in these workshops, we're workshopping it. And, everyone's different. There are comics out there that, like, Andy Kaufman and Lily Tomlin, you can't tell them no one else did what they did. But, I always let people be themselves, find their most authentic self, and and I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed teaching. So
And are you going to do more of them?
yeah, I have one on September 8th at the West Side Comedy Club. And then for the first time ever, I'm going to do like a 4-weekend thing. They talked me into it, where at the end of the weekend they perform. I don't even know how it's going to go yet. It might suck, but I'll let you know.
Yes, I do. As Jackie well knows and is very supportive,
Go ahead.
I do Stand Up University. It's a 7-week class, and people can go to standupuniversity.com.
I'm not interrupting.
Yeah, well, you resent that I take time to plug.
No,
I
there's
not
nothing
only
wrong with
resent
it.
you taking time to plug it,
so-
I resent you taking the time to talk about me resenting you.
Well,
And
okay.
it bumps me out that you guys are resenting what you're saying to each other.
And you're sitting
No,
there.
no,
And you're
you
sitting
know, the more the merrier, and I think it's terrific what you do. And how would they find out about these workshops that you do?
Well, now I've been doing them at the West Side Comedy Club. So you just go on their website under classes and they'll do it. And I love it. I really enjoy it. And it's always different. And again, I always tell people, like in the early days when I was booking Letterman, I would do workshops. I would say at the beginning of the workshop, this is not an audition for Letterman. This is a whole different animal. So if you're here to audition for Letterman, I'm just letting you know it's not going to happen. And in all the years and the hundreds and hundreds of performers, one person from Australia walked out and said, I came here for an audition. I said, look, I'll audition you separately. And that's a whole different thing. But you can't, again, I don't believe I can teach somebody, but what I can have, the thing I've learned most recently in the last 5 years, and I learned it from Rick Rubin, who's one of my heroes. And he said that when I go on stage, I just play my own music for myself. And if they like it, great. If they don't like it, fuck them. It's much more alluring to an audience member when you go up on stage and you're, owning your shit. And so I've learned to not perform, because Bill Hicks one time changed my whole life he said, when we hang out, you're funny, you're smart, you're good conversation. Then you go up on stage and do this love me dance. And I'm embarrassed for you. And it was pretty
Wow.
brave of him to say that. And again, he was right. I just wanted approval. I was doing the same jokes over and over again. And it's always nice when you get someone who'll tell you the truth. So yeah, so now I'm pretty much letting people know that, if someone says, like someone said to me, oh, Chappelle did this joke, I didn't like it. And I say, well, he's not here to please you. If you don't like
Right.
it, wait for the next comedian. It's not, you don't have to love everybody.
Is he
And
there
I
to
think, like,
please? Is he there to please himself?
yeah, he's there to do what makes him laugh. And it's up to him for that. And it's not, and like, for instance, if I see a girl that I like, and if I'm alluring and have a backbone and don't act like I need her every second, I think she'd like me more than if I'm like, oh, I love you, I can't, and it works in comedy as well. It's much nicer to see someone on stage who's, calling their own shots.
somebody that's at peace with themselves.
Right. It's just someone with a backbone. I was lucky because my mom was the funniest person in the world and had a million comedy albums and all that stuff. And she was hilarious. But what was great about her was she didn't give a shit if you liked it or not. And it was kind of alluring to see that. Here,
That
here.
is super interesting. We haven't had enough time with Eddie Brill. I'm getting a signal here. Will you come on again? Please come on again and let's continue this discussion.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I-
outside the door right now. I'm right outside your door.
All right. Because
No, I'd be happy to do it again. Yeah, no,
oh,
there's no problem.
absolutely. Because I would sometimes argue that a comedian doesn't necessarily decide what's funny. The audience decides what's
Well,
funny,
so,
which
you
is a
know,
different approach.
Two different schools.
Two different schools.
Yeah.
There are many schools of
Yeah.
thought and many ways to do comedy, and whatever works works. There are rules in comedy, but rules are made to be broken.
My
Right.
rule was always do something 3 times. If you do something that doesn't work, do it again, it doesn't work. If the 3rd time in a row it doesn't work, get rid of it unless it's something that you really like. In
That
that
happened to
case,
me.
fuck
That happened.
them. Keep it.
Happened to me. I had a joke that was so odd about the deck of cards, the king and the queen, and who's the jack, and all the stuff. And I loved it, and I couldn't get laughs. Couldn't get laughs. So I called Mendoza, and I told him, "Yeah, this is right up your alley. It's not. I'm not getting me laughs, but I think it's funny." He goes, "You're crazy. That's a funny joke." So then I called Stephen Wright, who I went to college with, and I said, "This is right up your alley." He goes, "It's too fucking funny." He says, "You got to write other jokes about the deck of dreams and deck of cards and all this stuff." And he was right. So I wrote all these other jokes, put it in the middle of it, and it got huge laughs. And then did it on, and 3 years later, I did it on television, and it got laughs.
Wow,
which
good
nice
for
worked
you.
out.
Now, did you say John Mendoza?
John
Yeah.
Mendoza.
Is he still with us? Is he out in LA?
Yeah, he's still with. He's out in L.A. I think he opens for Howie Mandel still. John was very good to me. I lived both New York and L.A. for the late '80s, and I was living at the Comedy Store. Mitzi's daughter. I was in the house over there, and Mendoza. I was there. It was like my playground. Every night I'd be at the Comedy Store, and Mendoza was very good to me. He took me to Vegas with him, and out in Long Island when the East End. We worked there the weekend the needles came up on the beaches in Long Island, if you
Oh,
remember.
wow.
I always remember that. But Mendoza was very good to me. I was very lucky. Schimmel and Kinnison and all these people, they took me in and treated me with respect, even though I wasn't as funny as I should have been, but they knew I worked hard.
Such great names
Now,
that
are you in
mentioned.
contact with Mendoza?
Every once in a while, I just call him out of the blue, and he's like, "Hey,
All right, I'm
Eddie."
going to bother you. I'm going to get his number. I'd love to talk to
Yeah.
him. I'd love to have him on the show.
Vietnam veteran and
Yes.
super funny, just naturally.
And he
Great
was one of the
guy.
first comedians to executive produce his own sitcom.
Yeah.
You remember and it was the first sitcom about divorce, kind of. And it was a very smart show because he was a very smart comedian. But he was very good to me. And we still, I still let him know, I think of you and all that stuff. I don't forget
All
those
right.
guys.
Eddie, to be continued, man.
Yeah, we gotta
Terrific.
go.
Ah, we gotta go. But you are
I understand.
you are so funny. And
Thank
thank you so much for coming on. And
It's about time. 5 years you've been
yeah,
doing
it's
it.
about time.
I'm
and
sitting
we'll
in
do
the
it again.
corner waiting
Well,
for the.
we say 5 seasons, but it's actually been more like what, 2.5 years or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm only. It's
No,
totally
but I'm saying it sounds so impressive.
And
Our 5th season,
I
what?
like I like the beard. I don't know if you audience react differently when you have a beard.
Yeah, it's been very, in January it was cold, so I didn't shave for a while. And then this girl I was dating was loving it. And then, so I kept the beard.
All right.
Yeah.
The best reason in the world.
All
Yes.
right.
All
Eddie
right.
Brill, thank you, man.
Thank you. And
It's
we'll
so good to see you guys. And let's keep in touch.
All right.
All right.
Jackie the Joke Man, Marlene Peter Bales,
Woo!
the incomparable Eddie Brill.
That's better.
Thank you. We'll see you next time on Stand Up Memories.